I arrived at our lakefront villa on Lake Champlain and froze. All my belongings had been thrown out behind the cedar grove. My daughter-in-law stood there and said, "We decided to do a little cleaning. Those old things don't fit this house anymore." I looked her straight in the eyes and answered, calm and steady, "Then I guess I'll start cleaning out the things that no longer serve me either." I took out my phone. It was time to show who really called the shots here. I will never forget that moment, that single instant when my life split in two. I had just come back from Montpelier. I'd buried my closest friend, Margaret, after 6 long months of watching her fade away from cancer. I was still wearing the black funeral coat, damp with mist and clinging to my skin. I could still smell the cold Vermont soil and the wilted flowers. I could still hear the wind slicing through the pine trees at the cemetery. I came home exhausted, hollow, and aching. All I wanted was a kind word, a cup of hot tea, maybe a hug from my son, Thomas. Instead, I was met with silence. Thick, heavy silence. I opened the gate and stepped into the 2-story whitewood house overlooking Lake Champlain. The house Michael and I had spent our lives saving for. The $3.5 million home whose cream walls I painted myself, where I planted cedar blooms so it would feel like summer all year round. 3 years ago, I had transferred the deed to Thomas when he married Natalie, because a mother always wants her child to have a home of his own. And now everything that belonged to me was lying on the ground like garbage. My clothes, my shoes, Michael's oil portraits, the wool shawl my mother knitted before she died, even the moss-green folder holding the property documents. Everything, absolutely everything, was scattered beside the white rose trellis I had tended with my own hands. I stood frozen. My purse slipped from my fingers. "What? What is this?" I whispered, feeling the air leave my chest. Then she appeared. Natalie, my daughter-in-law. She stepped onto the wooden porch with a smile, the kind you wear for a photo shoot. She wore a beige silk dress, hair perfectly curled, nails glossy, makeup flawless. She looked like she'd just walked out of a fashion magazine. And I had just come from a funeral. "Oh, you're back, Mom. I'm so glad," she said, her voice sweet as honey, that fake tone I knew all too well. "We just cleaned up a bit. You know how those old things take up so much space, and well, they don't match the style anymore." I stared at her. My hands began to tremble. "Old things?" I repeated slowly. "Natalie, those are my belongings. Your father-in-law's portraits, our family keepsakes, the papers." "Oh, yes, I know," she cut me off, waving her hand as if shooing a fly. "But we need space for the baby's room. Didn't Thomas tell you? I'm 3 months pregnant." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Pregnant? And this is how I find out, after they'd tossed my life into the cold? "Natalie, I need to speak with Thomas," I managed to say, my throat tightening. "He's at the office, Mom. He'll be home late. But don't worry. We've already prepared a space for you. Come, I'll show you." She looped her arm through mine, that false show of affection that made my skin crawl, and led me around the back of the villa to a small storage room once used for gardening tools and paint cans. She opened the door. "Ta-da! You can stay here. I set up a folding bed. Tiny, but enough. Just be discreet, okay? With the baby on the way, we don't want any tension." I looked inside. The room was barely 6 feet wide, reeking of damp paint and moldy wood. The only window faced a brick wall, and in that dim, airless space, something inside me broke, and something else quietly began to burn. The folding bed had a thin, yellowed mattress. Something inside me cracked, but deeper than the pain, something else began to rise, quiet, steady, certain. I looked straight at her. Natalie was still smiling, that triumphant smile, waiting for me to bow my head and say, "Thank you for leaving me a corner in this $3.5 million villa your father built." Instead, I took a long breath. "You're right, Natalie," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. "It is time to clean up. This time, for real. Everything I no longer need." Her smile froze for a second. I reached into my coat and pulled out my phone. The number had been saved there for years. Richard Crane, my estate attorney. "What are you doing, Mom?" she asked, her sweet tone suddenly gone. "Cleaning up," I answered. "Exactly as you said." I pressed the call button. While it rang, I looked straight into her eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't look away. Because at that moment, I understood something simple and absolute. I had given this house out of love, but I had never, not once, given away my dignity. And now they were about to learn who truly held the power here. If you've ever wondered how a woman who seems to have lost everything takes her power back, stay. This was only the beginning, and what came next, no one could have imagined. Richard picked up on the third ring. "Mrs. Hayes, what's wrong?" His voice was full of concern. He knew I'd just returned from my friend's funeral. "Mr. Crane, I need to see you tomorrow morning. It's urgent," I said, my eyes never leaving Natalie. Her fake smile had vanished. Her stare was cold, sharp, metallic. "Are you all right?" he asked. "No," I said quietly, "but I will be." I ended the call. Natalie crossed her arms. "You know this house belongs to Thomas, and I'm his wife. If you want to stay here, you'll follow our rules." My jaw tightened. I wanted to scream that I had built this villa with 40 years of work, that Thomas was only 25 when I signed the deed over without taking a single dollar. But I stayed silent. I'd lived long enough to know that words without weight are just noise. I needed my strength back first. "All right," I said evenly. "I'll stay in the storage room." She blinked, clearly surprised. I think she expected a fight, maybe tears. "Oh, good," she replied, her sweetness returning like syrup. "I'm glad you understand. One more thing. There's no space in the fridge for your food. You should buy your own and keep it in here. I can't handle any more stress. Doctor's orders." I nodded once. "Of course." "Perfect," she said. "Then welcome to your new space." And with that, she turned and walked away, her steps light and self-satisfied, like someone who believed she'd won. When the door closed, I was alone. Only then did I let myself cry. I cried for Margaret, my friend who'd just passed. For Michael, my husband gone 10 years. For the woman I used to be, strong, tireless, proud. And for Thomas, my son who once hugged me and said, "You're my hero, Mom." When did everything change? I sat on the damp-smelling bed. The walls were stained, the ceiling bulb swayed, not even a nail to hang my coat. Then I thought of my mother, the woman who raised 5 children through the Vermont winters after my father left. She once told me, "Daughter, a strong woman isn't strong because of what she owns. She's strong because she can rebuild when everything's gone." I wiped my tears. I took out my phone and began taking pictures, the cramped room, the piles of my things thrown in the yard, every single piece of it. If life has taught me anything, it's this. Truth always needs evidence. That night, Thomas came home after 11. I heard the sound of his car in the driveway, then voices, and Natalie's high-pitched laugh echoing through the hall. I waited. I thought he would knock on my door, ask how I was after my friend's funeral. But he didn't. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, barefoot, feeling the cold wood floor against my skin. The air was damp, heavy. I walked down the hallway and knocked on the master bedroom door. "Thomas," I called softly. Silence. "Thomas, it's Mom. I need to talk to you." The door cracked open. My son's face appeared. He looked tired, his eyes dark, thinner than the last time I'd seen him. "Mom, it's late," he whispered. "What is it?" "What is it?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Thomas, they threw all my things into the backyard. They put me in the storage room. And you didn't even tell me Natalie was pregnant." He dropped his gaze to the floor. "Mom, I was going to tell you, but you were in Montpelier with Mrs. Margaret, and—" "I just buried my best friend Thomas," I said, my throat tightening. "I just said goodbye to the last person who really understood me, and I came home to be treated like garbage." "It's not personal, Mom," he said, rubbing his eyes. "We just need more space. With the baby coming, things have to change." "Change?" I looked at him, barely believing what I heard. "Thomas, I bought this villa. I gave it to you because I thought you wanted me here, because I thought we were still a family." "We are a family, Mom," he said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "But Natalie's pregnancy hasn't been easy," the doctor said, to avoid stress. "She's just trying to protect the baby." "What about me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Don't I matter anymore?" He sighed. "Of course you matter, but you have to understand, Natalie is my family now. She's my priority. You're the one who taught me that when a man gets married, his wife comes first." Each word cut like a blade. "Not like this, Thomas," I whispered. "Not like this." "Please, Mom," he said softly. "We're exhausted. Let's talk tomorrow, okay? Try to understand." And he closed the door. I stood in the hallway, shaking. My son, the boy I had carried, taught to read, held through fevers and heartbreak, the boy who once said I was his hero. Now, he closed the door in my face. I walked back to the storage room like a shadow, but I didn't cry this time. Something inside me had changed. The grief was still there, but it was transforming into resolve, into a slow, steady anger, into the quiet belief that I couldn't let this stand. I sat on the folding bed and opened the small drawer beside it. Inside was something no one knew I kept, a worn leather notebook. In it, I'd written down every expense for the villa since the day I transferred the title. I turned the pages slowly, and what I saw made my blood run cold. But it also gave me my first weapon. What I discovered that night changed everything. And the worst part was, they had no idea what was coming. The notebook trembled in my hands. It was 2 a.m. The storage room was silent, except for the steady drip from an old copper pipe. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing faster with every line. I'd always been meticulous with money. I had to be. When you grow up poor, you learn the value of every dollar. So when I gave the house to Thomas, I only asked for one thing. "Son, I just want to be informed about the big expenses," I'd said. "Not to control you, just because this house is a legacy. And legacies need care." He'd agreed. The first year, he still showed me invoices, told me about repairs. We were a team. But after he married Natalie, everything changed. I stared at the numbers and felt the blood rise to my head. In the past 8 months, enormous withdrawals had been made from the family account. I had access to the bank statements because Thomas had once given me a debit card for emergencies, he said. I never used it. Occasionally I checked the transactions, just to be sure everything was fine. But now, looking at all of them together, the truth hit me like a punch to the chest. $4,500 in January. Living room repairs, $5,200 in February. New furniture, $3,800 in March. No note. $6,100 in April. Boston vacation, $4,800 in May. Shopping, $5,400 in June. Room redesign, $7,300 in July. No note. $7,900 in August. Baby expenses. I added them up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pencil. $45,000. Nearly $50,000 spent in 8 months. Where had that money come from? Thomas earned a decent salary as an architect, around $3,500 a month. But after utilities, gas, and insurance, there wasn't much left. Certainly not enough to blow more than $5,000 every month on luxuries. And then I remembered something that made my stomach turn. When I signed the villa over to Thomas, I also left him access to a savings account I had kept for years. My retirement fund, my life savings from decades of teaching, close to $60,000. I'd told him, "Son, this is for emergencies. Never let this account go empty." With trembling hands, I searched through the moss-green folder until I found the latest statement. I unfolded it. The world seemed to collapse. Current balance, $8,954. From $60,000 down to less than $9,000. The room spun. I sank to the floor, leaning against the damp wall, trying to breathe. More than $50,000 had vanished in less than a year. And I hadn't even noticed, because I'd been in Montpelier caring for my dying friend, because I trusted my son, because I never imagined they would do this. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they had used me. They had pushed me out of the home I built. They had claimed my space. They had humiliated me, using the very money I'd given them. I pushed myself up from the floor. My legs were trembling, but I walked to the small window. Outside, across the narrow alley, a warm light glowed from the house opposite mine, the home of Evelyn Brooks. Evelyn was a widow, like me. Every morning, she brewed tea and made waffles to sell to cafes around the lake, a woman who had worked all her life to raise her children. And in that moment, I needed to talk to someone who would listen. I threw on a robe over my nightgown and quietly slipped out. The wooden porch creaked under my feet. A thin mist clung to the air as I crossed the few yards between our houses. I knocked gently on her back door. "Who is it?" Evelyn's voice came from inside. "It's me, Evelyn, Lillian." The door opened at once. She looked worried. She knew I'd just come back from a funeral. "Good Lord, Lillian, what are you doing up at this hour? Come in, come in." I stepped into her small kitchen. It was warm, filled with the smell of baked batter and fresh coffee, the scent of a home, the scent my house used to have. "Tea?" she asked, already pouring me a cup before I could answer. I sat down at her worn wooden table, and suddenly the tears came. "Evelyn," I whispered, "have you noticed anything strange at my house these past few months?" She sat across from me, taking my calloused hands in hers. "I wasn't going to say anything, because you were away in Montpelier, but yes, I've seen plenty." "What did you see?" I asked, my heart pounding. Evelyn sighed. "Your daughter-in-law, Natalie. She doesn't work, right?" "No," I said quietly. "Thomas told me she doesn't need to. He makes enough." "Well, that's strange," Evelyn replied. "Every 2 weeks there's a new car in your driveway. Red, then white, then gray. And the handbags, designer ones from downtown Burlington. They cost thousands, Lillian." A chill ran down my spine. "And Thomas?" She shook her head. "He leaves early. Comes home late. Looks exhausted, poor thing. Something's not right over there." He looked tired and thin, as if he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. "What else, Evelyn?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then lowered her voice, as if about to share a secret she didn't want the night to hear. "The other day," she whispered, "I saw them selling your furniture set, the carved one from your living room. Some men in a truck came to load it up. Your daughter-in-law stood there, counting cash and smiling." The teacup slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile floor. That furniture set, my mother's dowry. It was over 70 years old. My grandmother had brought it from Philadelphia when she moved to the Lake Champlain Valley. It was worth a fortune, not because of the money, but because of the memories. And Natalie had sold it like it was junk. "How long ago?" I asked, my voice flat. "About 2 weeks ago," Evelyn said softly, "while you were still in Montpelier." I didn't answer. Evelyn stood to sweep up the broken pieces, but her movements were distant, muffled, as if behind glass. In my head, everything was falling into place. The missing money, the strange expenses, the sold furniture, my clothes thrown outside, the storage room. Natalie wasn't just pushing me out of the house. She was erasing me, my memories, my history, my very existence. And Thomas, my son, was letting her do it. I walked back to the storage room as dawn broke. The sky over the lake was pale gold, the world still quiet. I sat on the folding bed, the bank statements and the leather notebook spread across my lap, and I made a decision. If they wanted to play this game, I would play too, but by my rules. Because there was something they didn't know. The villa still belonged to me. Thomas had never filed the official transfer. All he had was my word. I still held every document, every contract, every seal. And they had no idea that the woman sitting in that shabby little room was no longer the woman from yesterday. That woman was gone, broken, stripped bare. But from her ashes, someone new was being born, someone stronger, someone dangerous. By sunrise, I had a plan, and even in their worst nightmares, they would never imagine what I was about to do. At exactly 9 o'clock, I knocked on Richard Crane's office door. I had washed my face with cold water from the outdoor tap. Natalie had locked the bathroom so I couldn't use the hot water. I wore my best black dress, the one from the funeral, and tied my hair neatly back. Because when you go to fight for what's yours, you show up looking like you mean it. Mr. Crane greeted me with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm very sorry about your friend Margaret. She was a good woman." "Thank you," I said, "but that's not why I'm here." We sat in his office, a quiet space lined with files and pale morning light. He poured me a glass of water and waited. I opened my bag and laid everything out on the desk. The leather notebook, the bank statements, the photos of my belongings scattered in the yard. And I told him everything. As I spoke, I watched his face change, from concern to disbelief to anger. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his chin. "Mrs. Hayes, this is very serious. Very serious." "I know," I said quietly. "Does your son know you still have access to that account?" "He gave me the card years ago," I said, "then forgot about it. I never used it." He nodded slowly. "All right. Then we'll take this step by step. First, the house. Do you still have the paperwork?" "Yes, right here." I pulled the moss green folder from my bag and handed it to him. I had guarded it like a treasure. He examined each page carefully, turning them with the precision of someone who understood the weight of the law. And then he smiled, a smile that wasn't pleasant at all. It was the kind of smile you only see on a man who knows the rules and how to use them. "Mrs. Hayes," Richard Crane said slowly, "do you realize what we're holding here?" "What do you mean, Mr. Crane?" He tapped the moss green folder with his pen. "The property deed. The house is still 100% under your name. Thomas never completed the legal title transfer with a notary." My heart skipped a beat. "But I gave it to him. As a gift." "Yes," he said, nodding. "But under the law, a real estate gift requires a notarized deed of transfer. You never filed one. All you did was give them permission to live there. In legal terms, that's called a tenancy at will. Simply put, you lent them the house. It was never theirs." For the first time in days, I felt a faint spark of light inside me. "So, what does that mean exactly?" "It means you can revoke that permission at any time. Legally, they're occupants without a contract, with no permanent rights to the property." I sat there absorbing every word. "What about the money?" I finally asked. $45,000 is gone." He flipped through the statements again, eyes cold and precise. "There's something interesting here," he said, pointing to a section of digital transactions. "Look at these transfers. Many of them are electronically signed. Did you authorize those?" "No," I said. "Never." "And Thomas, he had access to the account?" "Yes. I gave him the debit card years ago when I handed over the house, so he'd have some emergency funds." "But you never signed any documents making him a joint account holder, correct?" I thought about it. "No, the account is only in my name. He just had the card linked to it." Mr. Crane laced his fingers on the desk. His tone grew quieter. "Mrs. Hayes, this is delicate. If Thomas made those transfers without your explicit consent, it could legally be considered misappropriation of assets. Technically speaking, it's family fraud." Ma, the words fell heavy between us. "Fraud, my son. I don't want to hurt him, Mr. Crane," I said quickly. "I just want fairness." "And you will have fairness," he replied firmly, "but to gain the upper hand, we follow the process." He opened a notebook and began to write. "First, today, we change every one of your banking passwords. You are the sole owner of those accounts." I nodded. "Understood." "Second," he continued, "we'll create a full inventory of every asset that existed in the house when you allowed Thomas to live there, including the antique furniture set that was sold. You'll report the unauthorized sale of property." "Can I really do that?" I asked, half in disbelief. "Of course," he said, "because your name is still on the deed. Legally, everything inside that house still belongs to you." For the first time in months, I felt strength return to my body. "Third," he said, looking me straight in the eyes, "we will send an official notice to Thomas. He'll have two choices: vacate the property within 30 days or sign a formal lease with monthly rent and clear terms." "Rent?" I repeated. "You mean renting to my own son?" Mr. Crane's gaze softened, but there was no pity in it, only truth. Mrs. Hayes, your son expelled you from your home. He locked you in a storage room. He spent your money. He sold your mother's furniture. Do you truly believe he deserves to live there for free? He was right. Completely, painfully right. And if he refuses? I asked quietly. Then we proceed with eviction, he said simply. With the evidence you have, a judge will grant you a ruling in less than 3 months. I turned toward the window. Outside, Burlington was alive with the rhythm of a fall morning. Cars moving, people walking, the hum of everyday life. Yet inside this quiet office, my life was shifting course entirely. Is there anything else I should do? I asked. Mr. Crane flipped to a clean page. Do you have any other assets? Real estate, bank accounts, retirement funds? I thought for a moment. Yes. I own a small lakeside cabin. It used to belong to my husband. I've been renting it out for years. How much income does it bring in? About $6,800 a month, I said. A little more during the summer season. And where does that money go? To a separate account, one I keep for maintenance and taxes on the cabin. Thomas doesn't know it exists. He smiled again, this time genuinely. Excellent. That means you have independent income. That changes everything. It means you can stand on your own, even if you never step foot in that villa again. His words sank into me like sunlight breaking through fog. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small or powerless. Mr. Crane, I said softly, I trusted my son with everything I had, my home, my savings, my memories, and he... I stopped. My voice cracked. He closed the notebook and handed me a tissue. Mrs. Hayes, betrayal within a family is the hardest kind to face, but the law is here to protect you, even from your own blood. I dabbed my eyes. What happens next? He leaned back, thinking. I'll draft the official notice today. Once it's signed, we'll file it with the county clerk. That creates a legal paper trail, proof that the property rights are active and uncontested. Then we'll freeze any remaining joint access to your financial accounts. From that point forward, you regain full control. I took a deep breath. And Thomas? Mr. Crane looked at me evenly. He'll receive the notice in 2 days. My advice? Say nothing until then. Let the law speak first. I nodded slowly. There was a calmness I hadn't felt in years, a quiet clarity that comes right before a storm. He rose from his chair and walked me to the door. One more thing, Mrs. Hayes, he said, his tone softer now. When you walk back into that house, don't think of yourself as a victim. Think of yourself as the rightful owner returning home. Outside, the wind off Lake Champlain carried the scent of pine and cold air. I tightened my coat, feeling the weight of the folder under my arm, the green one that held everything. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, my hands didn't shake. Because now, I had something stronger than grief. I had a plan, and this time the law was on my side. That thought flashed through me like lightning. The idea of living alone at 67, after a lifetime spent caring for everyone else. Mr. Crane, I murmured, I'm not sure I can do this. He cut in gently but firmly. Mrs. Hayes, be honest with yourself. What do you truly want? Deep down. I was silent. What did I want? I wanted my son to apologize. I wanted him to treat me with the respect I deserved. I wanted my home back, my space, my dignity. But above all, I wanted them to understand that I was not a burden, not some outdated thing to be thrown away. I was not a shadow in my own house. I was Lillian Hayes, widow of James Hayes, who worked 40 years without rest, mother who raised 3 children alone after losing her husband, a woman who had earned the right to be respected. I want justice, I said finally, my voice steady. I want them to learn that no one, not even family, has the right to treat their mother that way. Mr. Crane nodded. Then we'll get you justice. But Lillian, he said carefully, you need to be ready. It's going to hurt. There will be tears, yelling, pleas. Thomas will try to make you feel guilty. Natalie will twist the truth. They'll call you selfish, crazy, ungrateful. They already have, I whispered. He gave a slow, knowing smile. Then this time will be different, because now you're fighting back. And when people fight back, masks fall off. I took a deep breath. I'm ready. Are you sure? I thought of my mother's antique furniture sold like junk. I thought of my savings drained without my consent. I thought of the damp storage room, of the slammed door. Yes, I said firmly. I'm sure. Then let's begin. I left Mr. Crane's office 3 hours later. Inside my purse were the new legal documents, new passwords, and a clear step-by-step action plan. But more than that, I carried something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. I walked through the streets of Burlington with a steady stride. The maple trees along Main Street shimmered in gold. I bought myself a cup of coffee and a small apple tart from a bakery I used to visit with James. I sat on a park bench and ate slowly, watching people go by. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because they thought they had broken me. They thought I had given up. They thought I would shrink into silence, an invisible old woman who would quietly disappear. But they were wrong, so very wrong. I wasn't broken. I was preparing for battle, and they had no idea what was coming. Thomas and Natalie were about to face the biggest shock of their lives, and I would be there to witness it. I returned to the house around 6 that evening, carrying 3 grocery bags. I'd bought everything I needed to live independently in that cramped little room: a small electric grill, some groceries, a few paper plates, and a pot. If they wanted me to live like a tenant, then I would. But I would do it with dignity. As I opened the front door, voices drifted from the living room. I looked inside. Natalie was there, dressed like she was posing for a magazine cover. A blush pink silk dress that had to cost over $1,000, perfect hair, polished nails. Beside her were her parents. Mr. Parker, a large man with a thick mustache and a booming voice, and Mrs. Lydia Parker, thin, elegant, and perpetually looking at me as though I were something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Thomas sat beside them, wearing a collared shirt and slacks, visibly uncomfortable. His fingers kept tugging at his collar. "Mother!" Natalie exclaimed, her voice sugary and false. "Oh, perfect timing. I've prepared a family dinner. My parents wanted to better understand our situation." Our situation. As if I were a problem to be managed. "Good evening," I said curtly, starting toward the hallway. "Oh, no," Natalie said quickly, stepping forward and grabbing my hand. Her grip tight, her smile even tighter. Her perfume was thick and sweet, like something meant to cover decay. "Please, Mrs. Hayes," she said in a voice that could have fooled anyone who didn't know her. "You simply must join us. This is a family discussion, after all." I looked at her hand on mine, those manicured fingers that had counted cash while selling my mother's furniture, and for a fleeting moment I wanted to tear my hand away. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Calm. Controlled. "Of course, Natalie," I said softly. "Lead the way." Her expression flickered, just for a second. She wasn't expecting that. Behind her, Thomas shifted in his seat, guilt flashing across his face like a shadow. Mr. Parker cleared his throat, ready to play patriarch. Mrs. Lydia folded her napkin neatly, avoiding my eyes. The dining table glowed under the chandelier. Silverware gleamed. The kind of setup meant to look civilized. But underneath, I could already sense the storm. Natalie gestured to an empty chair at the end of the table. "Here, Mother, sit. We saved you a seat." I placed my grocery bags down by the doorway. My hands were steady. My pulse was not. As I sat, I felt the weight of every betrayal pressing on me, the lies, the theft, the humiliation, but beneath that, something steadier was forming. Power. I looked at each of them in turn. The woman who'd stolen my home, the son who'd forgotten where he came from, the strangers who thought they could talk about my situation. They had no idea that, less than 24 hours ago, I had rewritten the terms of this game. Dinner was about to be served, but they weren't the only ones with a plan. I had no other choice. I sat down at the dining table, the same oak table I'd bought at a little antique market 15 years ago. Natalie had set the meal with her flawless smile. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, salad. Everything looked perfect. Everything smelled like home, and yet the air was tight as a wire. "Mrs. Hayes," said Mr. Parker, dabbing his mouth with a napkin, "my daughter tells me there have been a few misunderstandings lately." "Misunderstandings?" I repeated, measuring each syllable. "Yes," added Mrs. Parker smoothly, her tone practiced and diplomatic. "Natalie says you've been feeling abandoned, but you must understand, Lillian, young people need their space, especially with a baby on the way." I gripped the knife and fork tightly. "I understand the need for space," I said calmly. "What I don't understand is why my belongings were thrown into the yard without anyone asking me first." "Oh, Mother, please," Natalie said, waving her hand theatrically. "Let's not drag that up again. It was a misunderstanding. I apologized, didn't I?" She hadn't. Not once. "As for that storage room," Mr. Parker continued, puffing his chest, "I think Robert and Natalie have been very generous giving you a corner of the house. Many people your age don't even have that." People your age. As if I were a burden. Thomas, my Thomas, stayed silent, staring down at his plate. "And another thing," Mrs. Parker went on, her voice taking on the polite tone of a business meeting. "At your age, dear, you should really think about making things easier for everyone. There are wonderful senior communities, activities, nurses, privacy. It's very convenient." That was the real reason for this dinner. They wanted to convince me to move into a nursing home. I turned to my son. He wouldn't look up. "Thomas," I said, my voice firm, "what do you think about all this?" He finally lifted his head. His eyes were hollow, tired. "Mom, I just want peace. I want everyone to get along." "Peace?" I repeated, the word cutting through the air. "You want peace while you plan to send your own mother away?" "It's not a nursing home, Mom," Natalie jumped in quickly. "It's a resort-style community, gardens, activities." "I don't care," I interrupted. Silence fell over the table like a stone. Mr. Parker cleared his throat, adopting a grave tone. "Lillian, I understand this is hard, but you have to be realistic. Robert and Natalie are starting a family. You've already raised yours. It's their turn now." Each word hit me like a slap. "And about the finances," Mrs. Parker added, her voice cool and clinical. "Natalie mentioned there were some discrepancies with the bank accounts." So they had realized they couldn't access my funds anymore. "There are no discrepancies," I said clearly. "I simply changed my passwords, something I should have done long ago." Natalie's utensils clattered against her plate. "What are you doing, Mother? You're acting strange." "That money is mine," I said, feeling the heat rise inside me. Money I saved over 40 years of work. $68,700, withdrawn behind my back, for redecorating, shopping, luxuries. "Natalie, what exactly did you buy with my money?" Her face drained of color, then flushed red, then pale again. "How dare you?" she stammered. "How dare I?" I stood abruptly. "How dare I ask about my own money?" "I gave you this house out of love," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "I gave you my savings out of generosity. I gave you my space because I believed in family. Mom, I know. But you treated me like garbage," I said. "You humiliated me. You stole from me. You lied to me. And when I came home broken after my sister's funeral, you threw me out." "It was Natalie's idea," Thomas muttered. "I didn't know." "You knew," I said sharply. "You knew, and you did nothing. You shut the door in my face. You told me she was your priority. You told me to understand." "She's my wife, Mom," he said weakly. "I have to support her." "And what am I then?" I asked. "Trash? A burden to be tossed aside?" Thomas pushed back his chair and sank to his knees. "I'm sorry, Mom," he sobbed. "Please forgive me. I was weak. I've been a terrible son." I looked at him kneeling there, crying like a child, and something inside me broke. Not out of pain, but clarity. This was no longer the boy I'd raised. This was a man who had made his choices, and now he would face their consequences. "I won't throw you out on the street," I said quietly, "but things are going to change. Tomorrow, you're coming with me to Mr. Crane's office, and we'll sign a contract with clear rules." "Anything you want," he said, tears streaming down his face. "And Natalie will return every dollar she took. Either she pays or you do, but the money will be repaid." Thomas nodded, defeated. Yes, whatever you say." "Yes, I'll make it right. Just rest now, Mom." He rose slowly, looking at me like a man facing judgment. Do you hate me?" he asked. The question pierced my chest. "No, Thomas," I said softly. "I don't hate you, but I don't recognize you either. The son I raised would never have done this." I closed the door behind me. For the first time in many nights, I slept soundly, because I knew I'd won a small battle. But the real war was just beginning. The next morning, Thomas and Natalie came with me to the lawyer's office. They arrived on time, but Natalie wasn't alone. She wore dark sunglasses, clutching Thomas's arm like a lifeline, a tissue already in hand, prepared for the performance. Mr. Crane greeted us in his office, his expression grave and professional. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Thomas Hayes, Mrs. Natalie Hayes. Please have a seat." We sat. Natalie glanced around, searching for escape. "Let's begin," Mr. Crane said, opening a folder. "I've called you here to clarify a few legal matters. First, the property." He placed a copy of the deed on the table. "As you can see, the Lake Champlain villa, appraised at $3.5 million, is fully owned by Mrs. Lillian Hayes. 100%, no secondary owner." Natalie's head snapped up, her sunglasses sliding down her nose. "That can't be. Thomas told me." "What Thomas told you," Mr. Crane interrupted coldly, "has no bearing on legal fact. Mrs. Hayes is the sole owner. You have been residing there solely by her verbal permission, which in law is called tenancy at will." Natalie's voice rose. "But I'm her daughter-in-law. That's my home too." Mr. Crane didn't blink. "No, ma'am," he said evenly. "It isn't." He blinked rapidly, her jaw tightening. "But Thomas said—" Thomas looked down, silent. Mr. Crane didn't let her finish. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, turning to me, "you are within your full legal right to terminate that permission at any time, which means you can require them to vacate or to sign a rental agreement with set terms and payment." Natalie's mouth fell open. "A rental agreement? With her? You expect us to pay rent to my husband's mother?" Mr. Crane's tone remained calm, professional. "That's exactly what I expect, Mrs. Hayes, unless you'd prefer to vacate the property altogether." For a moment, the room was dead silent. Thomas's face had gone pale. Natalie stared at me as if I'd just pulled the rug from under her. I folded my hands on the table. "It's fair," I said quietly. "If you want to live there, you'll live by the rules and pay what's due." "You can't be serious," Natalie hissed. "After everything, after what we've done for you." "What you've done for me?" I interrupted, my eyes locked on hers. "You mean stealing from me? Selling my mother's furniture? Throwing my belongings into the yard?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Mr. Crane slid another document across the table, the formal notice. "Here are the terms. You have 30 days to vacate or sign the lease. If neither happens, legal eviction proceedings will begin immediately." Natalie's face twisted. "This is insane. You can't do this to family." "This is not personal," Mr. Crane said evenly. "This is law, and the law protects ownership, not manipulation." Thomas's voice cracked. "Mom, please, can't we just talk about this?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the ache of every year, every sacrifice. "We are talking, Thomas," I said softly. "This is me, talking with the truth." Natalie slammed her hand on the table, tears forming but not falling. "You'll regret this, Lillian. You'll be alone." I stood, calm, certain. "I've been alone before," I said, "and I've survived every time." Mr. Crane gathered the papers and handed me my copy. "That concludes our meeting," he said. "Mrs. Hayes, you'll receive a notarized confirmation by end of day. I nodded, thanked him, and turned toward the door. Behind me, Natalie's voice broke into sobs. Loud, rehearsed, hollow. Thomas reached for her, but she pushed him away. And for the first time, I walked out of that office not as a mother begging for respect, but as a woman reclaiming what was hers. I didn't know, Natalie stammered. No, I said, voice calm and cold. You didn't know because you never cared to ask. To you, anything not new or expensive is worthless, just like me. A useless old woman, a burden to be discarded. The words left my mouth so evenly they chilled even me. That's not true. No. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken the night I returned from Grace's funeral. Look, I said, holding it up. These are my things, my paintings, my clothes, Michael's keepsakes, all thrown behind the house like garbage. Natalie stared at the screen, her face pale. I thought those were things you didn't want anymore. And that gave you the right to throw them out? I said sharply. Without asking, without waiting for me to come home from burying my sister? You said you needed space for the baby. I felt the anger rising in my chest, steady, righteous. You had the whole house, I said. A 2-story villa, 4 bedrooms, a view of Lake Champlain. Why did you need my room? Why humiliate me like that? Natalie buried her face in her hands and sobbed, but her tears no longer reached me. I'd seen enough of them to know they were just another mask. Mr. Crane, I said, turning toward the lawyer, I want them out of my house. I want to begin the eviction process. No! Thomas jumped to his feet. Mom, please. We have nowhere to go. Natalie's pregnant. You should have thought about that, I said quietly, before betraying your mother. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Crane said calmly, legally, I can file the paperwork today. They will have 30 days to vacate. That would leave us homeless, Natalie cried out, her voice cracking. With an unborn child. What kind of grandmother does that make you? Her words hit me like a hammer. What kind of grandmother am I? A woman who has lost everything. A woman who's been betrayed. A woman tired of being stepped on. But when I looked at Natalie, really looked, I saw something new. Genuine fear. Not arrogance, not performance. For the first time I saw a young, foolish woman who had made terrible choices, but was still carrying my grandchild. I exhaled slowly. I won't put you on the street, I said at last. But everything changes today. You'll both sign a legal lease, $1,800 a month in rent, and you'll repay the $68,700 you took, $1,000 per month for 4 years, miss a single payment, and the eviction stands. 1,800 plus 1,000, Thomas whispered, his voice trembling. That's $2,800 a month. We can't afford that. Then Natalie will work, I said plainly, like everyone else. I'm pregnant, she shot back. I can't. I worked until my 8th month carrying you, I said, cutting her off. Scrubbing school floors on my knees. Don't you dare use pregnancy as an excuse. Natalie's eyes filled with fury. You'll regret this, she hissed. When the baby's born, you'll never see it. You'll die alone, bitter and forgotten. The words stabbed at me, but I didn't flinch. If that's my cross to bear, I said quietly, I'll carry it. But I will never be a slave in my own home. Mr. Crane began preparing the documents right there at his desk. The sound of paper sliding, the scratch of his pen, the hum of the printer. It all felt final, heavy, real. Thomas signed first, his hand shaking. Natalie hesitated, jaw tight, eyes darting toward him. He whispered something, begging, pleading, and finally she signed too. When they left the office, they said nothing. I remained a moment longer. Standing by the window, I watched them walk down the steps. My son, small beside her, a man who had once called me his hero. Mr. Crane handed me my copy of the agreement. It's done, he said. I nodded, my voice barely more than a breath. Thank you. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the cold air that rolled off Lake Champlain. The wind smelled of pine and iron. I had won. but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. I'd reclaimed my house, my money, my rights, but I might have lost my only son, and I wasn't sure I would ever forgive myself for that. But the story wasn't over. Because 3 days later, something happened that changed everything. And this time, it was worse than anything I could have imagined. It was 3 days after the contract was signed. I woke in the small room just as the morning light touched the window pane. The air was cold and still. For a moment, I thought it was just another quiet dawn. Then a sharp pain struck my chest. Not sadness, not exhaustion. Something real, physical, deep and frightening. It spread like fire beneath my ribs. I pressed my hand to my heart and gasped, realizing what it was. This wasn't grief. This was danger. And as the room tilted around me, one thought rose above the pain. Clear, simple, absolute. Not yet. I wasn't done. A crushing pressure seized my chest, as if someone's hands were squeezing the life from my heart. I tried to sit up, but my legs wouldn't move. My breath caught. The room began to spin. "Help," I whispered, the word barely escaping my throat. I hit the wall once, then twice. The third time, my arm went limp. Everything went black. I woke to a blinding white light, the sharp hum of fluorescent lamps, the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. A needle pressed into my wrist, connected to an IV bag that dripped slowly beside me. "She's awake," a woman's voice said near the bed. A nurse approached, checking my pulse, adjusting the blood pressure cuff. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Hayes?" What happened?" I asked, my voice dry, scraping. "You suffered a mild heart attack," she said gently. "Your neighbor found you and called for help. You're lucky to be alive." "Evelyn, my guardian angel." "How long?" I whispered. "You've been here about 8 hours. We contacted your family." "2 of your children are on their way." My heart stuttered. "2? Thomas?" The nurse hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "Thomas was informed," she said softly, "but he hasn't arrived." Those words hurt worse than the heart attack itself. My son, living less than 30 minutes away, hadn't come, but the others had. Marianne and George, my daughter and younger son. They had dropped everything, work, miles of highway, to be here. "Mom!" Marianne cried as she rushed in, hugging me as though I were porcelain. Her eyes were red and swollen. George took my other hand, gripping it tightly, steadying me. "What happened, Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling. So I told them, piece by piece, the belongings thrown into the yard, the storage room, Natalie, the bank statements, the sold antique furniture. As I spoke, their faces changed, from concern to shock to fury. "What?" Marianne exploded, standing up. "Thomas did this? I'll kill him." George pushed his chair back, fists clenched. "I'm going there right now." "No," I said, forcing my voice to steady, using what little strength I had. "It's already been started. Mr. Crane has everything in motion. We signed the papers." "Crane knows?" Marianne asked sharply. She reached for her phone. "I'm calling Thomas." I tried to stop her, but she'd already dialed. The line rang. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. "He's rejecting the calls," she said, her voice trembling with rage. George tried next. The same result. "When you're discharged, you're coming home with me," Marianne said firmly. "You're not staying in that storage room another night." "I've already rented a small apartment," I said, managing a faint smile. "A safe little box, paid for with the rent from the lake house." "What apartment?" George asked, confused. "One I've had since your father, Michael. We've rented it out for years." They looked at each other. "You kept that from us?" Marianne asked, surprised. "It wasn't a secret," I said quietly. "It was preparation. When a woman loses her husband, she learns to be ready for anything." Marianne sank back into her chair and squeezed my hand hard. "Mom, listen to me. Thomas has no right to treat you like that. I don't care if he's our brother. What he's done is unforgivable." "He's married," I said softly. "He chose his wife." "Choosing a wife doesn't mean trampling your mother," George snapped. His eyes burned. "A good wife brings family together. She doesn't tear it apart." Their words struck me harder than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I closed my eyes. Tears slid down my cheeks, silent, clean. Marianne leaned closer, her voice breaking. "You gave us everything, Mom. Now it's our turn to take care of you." I turned my head toward the window. The light from the lake shimmered through the glass, cold but steady, like truth itself. Inside me, the anger that had burned for weeks began to cool. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something quieter, stronger, resolve, not the fiery kind that screams for revenge, the still kind that waits, observes, and knows exactly what must come next. Hours later, when the nurse came back to check my vitals, I felt different. My body was weak, but my mind had never been clearer. "Mrs. Hayes," she said kindly, "your condition is stable now. You'll need rest and follow-up care." I nodded slowly. "I will." As she left, I looked down at my hands, frail, veined, but steady. Thomas might not have shown up. Maybe he couldn't face me, maybe he didn't care. But I was done waiting for apologies that would never come. From now on, my life would move forward, with or without him. The lake light shifted again, glinting across the sterile hospital room, filling it with a pale glow. Outside, I could see the tops of the trees swaying in the wind, and for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel trapped. I felt ready to rebuild, ready to live again, on my own terms. "I don't want to be a burden," I whispered. "You are not a burden," Evelyn said firmly, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "You're the woman who raised an entire family. If anyone ever made you feel like a burden, that's their failure, not yours." I smiled faintly, but it trembled. "I just don't want anyone to feel responsible for me anymore." "Lillian," she said, taking my hand gently, "sometimes taking care of yourself is the strongest thing you can do." The door opened softly. An older doctor walked in, silver frames perched on his nose, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Hayes," he greeted me, voice calm but direct. "Your heart attack was mild, but it was caused by prolonged stress. Your blood pressure is at a dangerous level. If you don't make serious changes, the next one might not be so mild." The air in the room grew heavy. "What does she need to do, doctor?" Evelyn asked quietly. "First," he said, ticking off the list, "eliminate all sources of stress. Second, take your medication regularly. Third, begin therapy. And finally," he paused, eyes meeting mine, "you need to live in a healthy environment, surrounded by people who bring you peace, not pain." Then his tone softened, though his eyes stayed sharp. "Mrs. Hayes, what causes you the most stress right now?" I drew a slow breath and turned toward the window. I thought of Thomas, of Natalie, of the damp storage room, of the pile of my belongings tossed behind the house I had built with a lifetime of work. "My son," I said softly, "and his wife." The doctor nodded once. "Then, medically speaking, you should suspend all contact with them for at least 3 months. You need recovery, and you can't heal in the same place that broke you." Those words fell like a blessing. For the first time in months, I felt permission, not to fight, not to prove, but simply to step away. "I'll do that," I said quietly. Evelyn smiled, warm and certain. "And I'll be here," she said, "every step of the way." 2 days later, I was discharged. Evelyn helped me find a small apartment overlooking Lake Champlain. Modest, bright, peaceful. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, white curtains that fluttered in the morning breeze. Each morning, I brewed a pot of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sunlight ripple across the lake. For the first time in many months, I felt peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks with one phone call, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from surviving. A week later, while I was sipping coffee at the little table by the window, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," the voice said. "This is Richard Crane." "Mr. Crane," I smiled. "Good morning." "I have some good news," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "Thomas just made his first payment. $2,800, $1,800 for rent, $1,000 toward the debt." I froze. "Really?" "Yes, ma'am. And there's more. Natalie has taken a job, perfume sales at the Burlington department store." I couldn't help it. A small, ironic smile crept across my face. Natalie, who once sneered at anyone who worked retail, now spending her days under harsh fluorescent lights, smiling at strangers. Life always finds a way to teach the lessons we refuse to learn. "Thank you, Richard," I said softly. "One more thing, Mrs. Hayes," he added, his voice lowering. "Thomas called the office this morning. He asked about your health. He said he wants to see you." "I'm not ready," I said immediately. "I understand," he replied. "I just thought you should know." I ended the call and set the phone on the table. Outside, the lake shimmered in the afternoon sun. The wind nudged the curtains, scattering the light across the room like ripples of silver. On the path below, people strolled hand in hand. Children laughed. A few waterbirds skimmed the surface, their reflections breaking into tiny waves. I took a deep breath, feeling the air move through me like something sacred. I had lost much: my home, my trust, the son I thought would protect me, but I had also reclaimed something far greater, my dignity, and I knew no one would ever take that from me again. Still, as I looked out at the horizon, I couldn't shake a quiet feeling deep in my chest. Thomas. Something told me this wasn't the end. Not yet. The water outside shimmered brighter, as if holding a secret. And somewhere inside me, I felt it too. The uneasy calm that always comes right before the next storm. "But you can't keep living like this, Thomas," I said softly, "destroying yourself. And you can't come here expecting me to fix your life every time it falls apart." He stayed silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice that trembled like the boy he once was, he asked, "You don't love me anymore, do you?" The question pierced straight through my chest. "I'll always love you, Thomas," I said. "You're my blood, my flesh. I carried you, raised you, taught you to walk, to read, to know right from wrong. But I don't trust you anymore, and I don't know if I ever will again." "What do I do?" he asked hoarsely. "Tell me what I need to do to earn that trust back." "Grow up," I said quietly. "Stop hiding behind excuses. Act like a man who stands for something. Choose what's right, even when it costs you." "And if I do that, will you forgive me?" I looked at him, his eyes sunken, shoulders slumped, his face older than his years. "I don't know, Thomas," I said truthfully. "I really don't know." He rose slowly from the couch. He looked worn out, lost, like a man searching for a map that no longer existed. "Then all I can do," he said, voice steadying, "is show you through my actions. No more words." He walked to the door, paused, and turned back. "When the baby's born, will you come see it?" The question froze me. "If you truly invite me," I said, "if you treat me with respect, if Natalie welcomes me without a scene, then yes, I'll come." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mom." And then he left. I stood in the middle of my apartment, hands trembling slightly. Evelyn had been right. Seeing him was exhausting, but necessary. He needed to hear the truth, and I needed to say it out loud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every word, every expression, the tremor in his voice, the guilt on his face. Had I been too cold, or was I finally protecting what was left of my heart? At 2 a.m, my phone rang, an unknown number. "Mrs. Hayes?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Margaret Pierce, Natalie's mother." My blood turned cold. "Mrs. Pierce? Calling me at this hour?" "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice cracking. "But this is urgent. I have information you need to hear. About Natalie, about your son." What kind of information? I asked carefully. I can't explain over the phone, she said. This could change everything. I tightened my grip on the phone, heart pounding hard enough to hurt. Why would she call me? The same woman who once sat across from me at that dinner table, looking down her nose like I didn't belong, now sounding desperate, almost frightened. I'll meet you, I said finally, but not alone. I'll bring my attorney. The next morning, I called Richard Crane. Mrs. Hayes, he said through the line, instantly alert. I'll be there. Don't go without me. That afternoon, we met Margaret Pierce at a small cafe near Church Street Square. Snow drifted lazily past the window. She arrived right on time. But the woman who walked in was nothing like the polished socialite I remembered. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes hollow with dark circles, her hands trembling as she set her purse down on the table. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her voice cracked like glass. "What do you want, Mrs. Pierce?" Richard asked, calm but guarded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope, setting it gently on the table. "I need you to know the truth about my daughter," she said, "about who she really is." My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. Inside were pages, bank statements, photos, printed text messages. The numbers blurred together as I scanned the documents. $23,000, I murmured. "What is this?" "Credit cards," Margaret said, her eyes filling. "My daughter's an addict, a shopping addict. She can't stop. We've paid off her debts 5 times. 5 times. Richard flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing. "These cards were opened 3 years ago, before she married Thomas." "Yes," Margaret whispered, nodding. "She met him on a dating app when she found out he owned property, and that you were wealthy. She saw an opportunity." It felt like ice water pouring down my spine. "You're telling me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "that my daughter-in-law married my son for his money?" "Not just that," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "She also lied about the pregnancy." The world stopped. "What did you just say?" Margaret reached back into her bag and handed me a smaller folder. Medical forms, prescriptions, and printed messages. "Natalie can't have children," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She's had uterine complications since she was 18. We've known for years. Her doctors confirmed it. Natural conception is impossible." I stared at the papers, unable to breathe. The sound of the cafe faded, the chatter, the clinking of cups, the murmur of winter wind, all of it vanished beneath the roar in my ears. Natalie, the baby, the lie, it all clicked. The timing, the manipulation, the sudden rush to secure financial agreements, the crocodile tears. Richard leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "Mrs. Pierce, are you certain about this?" "I wish I weren't," she said, shaking. "But yes, and she doesn't know I came to you. She'd destroy me if she found out." I looked down at the documents again. The ink, the signatures, the truth. My fingers clenched around the folder. For months, I'd believed the worst was behind me. But now, staring at this evidence, I realized something much darker was still unfolding. "She's lying," Margaret Pierce said, her voice breaking. "There's no pregnancy, not once. Look at these messages." She handed me her phone. On the screen were WhatsApp exchanges between her and Natalie. Natalie: "I told Thomas I'm pregnant. He's so happy." Margaret: "Natalie, you can't do that. What if he finds out?" Natalie: "He won't know. I'll say I miscarried in a few months. By then I'll be settled in the house." Margaret: "That's wrong. So wrong." Natalie: "You never support me. I need this house. My credit cards are a mess. If I don't get out, they'll sue me." I could hardly breathe. "Thomas doesn't know?" I asked. Margaret shook her head. "Not a thing. My daughter is a good liar. She bought maternity clothes, Googled fake symptoms, even ordered positive test images online to photograph." "Why tell me?" I croaked. "You're her mother." She bowed her head and covered her face with both hands. Because I can't stand it anymore. I've kept quiet too long, watching her ruin people. Before Thomas, she did this to 3 other men. The same playbook. Fake pregnancy, take money, disappear. My breath hitched. Good God. But this time, she said, she found a man with a house. And when you appeared as an obstacle, she did whatever she had to. I saw her throw your things out, sell furniture, humiliate you. I'm ashamed I didn't stop it. Richard folded his hands on the table, voice low and steady. Silence equals complicity. Margaret nodded. Tears fell. I know. That's why I'm here. Yesterday, Natalie begged me for $5,000. She said it was for fake tests, to keep the lie alive. I couldn't do it anymore. Richard organized the papers, methodical and precise. I'll need notarized copies and a written affidavit. Will you testify? Anything, Margaret sobbed. I just want this to end before she ruins anyone else. I looked at her, then asked quietly, Does Mr. Pierce know? No, he thinks she's finally settled. If he knew, he'd be devastated. He will know, Richard said firmly. This is no longer family drama. This is deliberate fraud. I stared at the stack of documents in front of me. My son Thomas had been deceived, manipulated, pulled down by a woman who never loved him, who only saw opportunity. I have to tell him, I said, voice raw. Richard looked up. Are you sure? This will crush him. He's already crushed, I answered, but at least knowing the truth, he can begin again. On something real, not built on lies. Margaret gripped my hand, eyes wet. Thank you. Thank you for being a proper mother, for protecting my son, even when he didn't protect you. Her words landed deep, because whatever else, I am his mother. That afternoon, I called Thomas. He picked up after 2 rings. Mom. Thomas, I need you at my apartment. Now, this is urgent. Is everything okay? Are you all right? I'm fine, but you must come and bring Natalie. But Mom, either both of you are here in an hour, or I will come to you. I cut the call. Outside, the snow thickened. On the table, my tea had gone cold, but inside me, the flame of resolve burned brighter than ever. This time, the truth would not be buried. How could you ever forgive me, Mom? How can you even look at me after everything I've done to you? I left my chair, sat beside Thomas, and cupped his face in both hands, the same way I used to when he'd wake up crying from a nightmare on winter nights. Thomas, listen to me carefully, I said softly. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters isn't the mistake itself, but what you do afterward. But You've owned up to what you did. You ended something toxic. You're rebuilding your life. That takes more courage than never falling at all. Do you really forgive me? I nodded slowly, my voice gentler. I forgave you the moment you had the strength to face the truth. We held each other. And for a moment, something between us, something that had shattered, began to mend. Not completely. The scars would stay. The pain, too. But it was healing, and that was enough for now. 3 months later, my phone rang. An unknown number. Mrs. Hayes, this is Richard Crane. Mr. Crane, I said, startled. Is everything all right? I have news. Natalie was arrested this morning. I froze. Arrested? For what? Fraud, he said flatly. After the divorce, she repeated the same scheme with a businessman in Albany, claimed she was pregnant, took money from his account, even sold some of his personal property. I closed my eyes. My God. This time, he continued, the victim hired a private investigator. He uncovered her entire history, the previous scams, forged medical records, fake pregnancy tests bought online. He filed criminal charges. She's facing up to 8 years in prison, and the former victims are preparing a joint civil suit. Her mother, Mrs. Margaret Pierce, has agreed to testify. I said nothing for a long time. Does Thomas know? Yes. I called him an hour ago. He said he hopes she'll finally learn something, that she'll get help, but that it's no longer his responsibility. I nodded to myself. That's a sign of growth. There's more, he said. Thomas has made every payment on time, $2,200 a month, 4 months straight. No delays, no complaints. I know, I said with a quiet smile. I still check the account. He also asked if you'd be open to revising the agreement, not to reduce the amount, but so he could visit more often. He said, he misses talking with you. My throat tightened. Tell him to come for Sunday dinner, I said. I'll make beef stew, his favorite. I heard Richard chuckle softly on the other end. I'll pass that along. And Mrs. Hayes. I'm glad things are finally turning around. Thank you, Richard, for everything. That Sunday, Thomas came. He brought a small bouquet and a chocolate cake. You didn't need to bring anything, I said as I opened the door. I wanted to, he replied. It's the least I can do. We had dinner together, talked about his job, his new apartment, his plan to save for a home of his own. We talked about Evelyn, about Mrs. Pierce, about hard lessons learned. We talked about everything and nothing, like we used to, before Natalie stepped into our lives, and somewhere between the clinking of spoons and the quiet laughter, there was peace again, fragile, but real, like soft snow falling outside the window. When the dishes were done, Thomas pulled an envelope from his backpack. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside were legal documents, property transfer papers for the Lake Champlain house. No fine print, no conditions, no retained rights. It was now fully mine. Thomas, what is this? It's always been yours, he said. But now it's official. 100% yours. I'm giving up all claim. But the house was supposed to go to you. It was a gift I held on to out of guilt. He interrupted gently. You need a safe place, a real home. And that's your home, Mom. I'll build my own someday, the way I should have from the start. Tears spilled onto my hands. Where will you live? I'll stay in my apartment. I'm saving up. One day I'll buy a house, with my own hands. He reached across the table and took my hand. Please, let me do this, Mom. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my heart filling with a peace I hadn't felt in years. That night, after he left, I stood by the window overlooking Lake Champlain. The moonlight shimmered on the surface like a silver ribbon across still water. In the kitchen, the pot of stew still held its warmth, and I realized, forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's learning to stand tall among the scars so the light can find its way through. Let me show you, Mom, Thomas said, eyes steady, voice sure. Let me prove that I've learned, that I've grown, that your sacrifices weren't in vain. I pulled him into my arms. My son, my boy, no longer a child. Finally the man I always knew he could become. 6 months later, I was back in the same house on Lake Champlain, but it felt different. I had scrubbed every corner, repainted the walls a soft gray, placed red geraniums in white pots by the window. Evelyn helped me rebuild the kitchen, and in a strange twist of fate, Margaret Pierce sent over a basket of fresh flowers with a small card that simply read, "Wishing you peace." And Thomas. Thomas visited every Sunday. Sometimes he came with friends, sometimes alone, but he always came, always on time, always kind, always warm. One late afternoon, we sat in the garden beneath the lilac arbor I had planted when I was young. The golden light spilled through the leaves, touching our glasses of iced tea. Do you know what today is? I asked. What day? Thomas smiled. Exactly 1 year ago, I said softly. I came home from Aunt Grace's memorial and found my belongings thrown out behind the house. A silence fell. Mom, Thomas began. No, I said gently, raising a hand. I'm not saying it to blame. I'm saying it because a year ago I thought I had lost everything. My home, my dignity, my family, my son. I looked at him. But the truth is, I only lost illusions. When all the lies were stripped away, I finally saw what mattered. What's that? He asked quietly. The people who stay, I said. The ones who fight for you. The ones who show that family doesn't have to be perfect. To still be real. Thomas turned away and wiped his eyes. I also learned something else, I continued, that I'm stronger than I ever believed, that I can draw boundaries, demand respect, and not feel guilty for it, that I don't have to survive on scraps of affection. You taught me that, Thomas said softly, that sometimes real love is the courage to say, enough. I nodded. Exactly. And today, 1 year later, I'm sitting in my garden, in my home, with my son, drinking lemonade, in peace. In peace, he echoed. We clinked our glasses and laughed. And for the first time in a long while, everything felt right again. That night, after Thomas left, I stepped into the garden one last time. Above me, the stars shimmered over Lake Champlain, the same sky I'd looked at a year ago when my heart was shattered. But now, there was no brokenness, only beginnings. I had fallen, I had shattered, I had reached the bottom, but I had risen, and I had learned the most important lesson of all. Dignity isn't something you give away, it's something you protect. Respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you demand, and real love never humiliates, it uplifts. It is never too late to clear your life of what no longer serves you, even if that means standing alone. Because standing alone with dignity is better than having company in humiliation. I smiled and looked up at the sky. Thank you, Grace, I whispered, thinking of my sister. Thank you for reminding me that life's too short to spend with people who don't value you. The night wind brushed through the lilacs, their petals trembling softly, and I swear I heard her voice in the breeze. It's all right, little sister. Now live, truly live. And that's exactly what I did. I lived, with dignity, with peace, with self-respect, and with the quiet certainty that I had won the most important battle of all, the battle for my own soul. If this story touched your heart, maybe it's because part of it belongs to you. Maybe you, too, have been hurt by someone who was supposed to love you. Maybe you felt you weren't enough, that you had to settle for less. Let me tell you, from the bottom of my heart, you are worthy. You have always been worthy of respect, of space, of peace, and of happiness that's truly yours. And if anyone at all, makes you feel small, then it's time to say, enough. Set your boundaries, reclaim your respect, protect your soul, because life is far too short to live on your knees, and it is never too late to stand up. I did it at 68. You can too. If this story moved you, let me know where you're watching from. The United States, Canada, the UK, Mexico. I'd love to hear how these words reached you. Click. Like if you believe dignity is priceless, and subscribe to Grandma Life Stories for more tales of brave women who chose not to give up. Because inside each of us, there's a warrior waiting to be awakened.